Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Adkup Show. So, Donald Trump has finally said in the media that he wants to cut down the defense spending, not by 10 or 15%, but by half, that is 50%. So, he's talking about bringing down the defense spending from $900 billion, actually more than $900 billion, to below $500 billion. That's an extremely massive cut, which will have a geopolitical as well as economic repercussions. In this episode, we will try to understand these geopolitical and economic consequences if Donald Trump successfully slashes the defense spending by half. So without wasting time, let's get started. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the stories behind them. First off, let's talk about why the United States has so many military bases around the world. What's the reason behind it? According to many reports, the United States has approximately 750 military bases abroad in more than 80 countries. Countries like Russia and China or even India doesn't have more than a few bases, and that too for limited use. The answer for this question is very simple. It is because of trade and globalization. The Cold War, which started after World War II, made United States to go around the world and establish alliances with like-minded countries, and since then the status quo was maintained. But now the status quo has become unsustainable. Global trade, the backbone of world economy, has seen its fair share of ups and downs recently. But the question is, why does this matter? This matters because trade isn't just moving goods from point A to point B. It's about how economies interact, grow, or sometimes struggles, and they struggle together, right? And to happen all this, security is the most important factors. But now what's happening is that the global trade is on overall decline. I will give you an example. Let's assume that the global trade is $100 billion and majority of that trade happens to few common trade routes. But in order to sustain that trade, the United States spends billions on global supply chain and security. This spending is too high in relative sense. There is no need to spend that much money. Here's one question. Why should the United States spend billions of taxpayers' money to guard trading routes of other countries? I know many of you guys will say it is because the United States is a superpower. I agree with this point, but in reality, it is a declining superpower and an empire. The United States now is not what it used to be. Now you might think, is it possible for China to replace the United States? Well, the answer is no. I mean, China's military budget is only $250 billion. Unlike the United States, China has many conflicts with its neighbors. Now the question is, will China spend billions and trillions of dollars to establish its dominance over trade routes so that globalization can continue? Well, the answer for this also is no. China will neither spend nor it can spend that much money. China is an industrial giant, and whoever wants to trade with China will have to cooperate with China. The reality is that there is nothing after post-Americana. Countries which are able and can have an industrial base, they will have, and those who cannot will simply end up in a never-ending civil war due to scarcity and crisis. However, the United States military global footprint with bases in over 80 countries is a massive economic and strategic commitment which the United States can't abandon overnight. There is a procedure to do it, and Donald Trump is just trying to follow that procedure. Here we are talking about commitments of billions and trillions of dollars into keeping these bases operational so that the world can run according to the wishes of the American empire. Let's try to learn something more about the global trade. In 2023, global trade experienced a downturn, reducing by around 3% to $31 trillion. This was largely due to 5% decrease in goods trade, influenced by several factors like inflation, Post-COVID economic recovery led to high inflation rates, reducing consumer purchasing power. Geopolitical tensions like conflicts and political strains affected trade routes and agreements. This played a major role in deindustrialization of Germany and rest of Europe. Their purchasing power is eroding fast. The factories which were closed due to Russia-Ukraine conflict in Europe all ended up shifting to China, and they won't be returning back anytime soon. Not only that, but now China has shown interest in buying off all the factories in Europe which are on the verge of shutting down. We can assume that it's some sort of a bailout in order to help Europe retain its purchasing power so that Europe can continue to buy from China. Erosion of purchasing power of EU countries is not good news for China, as China will lose the market. Now here is where the dilemma of the United States comes into play. Why should the United States spend billions in Europe while there's no good returns on it? Why don't China or any other country spend billions and maintain this global trade network? Supply chain issues are also becoming a major problem. From shipping delays to labor shortages, these challenges persisted, and these problems are only going to increase in the future. The United States and the Trump administration believes that there is no use of investing unlimited amount of money in maintaining this rotten status quo. However, not all was doom and gloom. Service trade, including tourism, saw an 8% increase. The World Trade Organization predicts a 2.7% rise in goods trade, and UNCTAD sees a potential $33 trillion in total trade, with services leading the charge at a 7% growth. Now, why this increase happened? Well, the world was eager to travel again after COVID ended, and digital services continued to grow. But here's the catch. You don't need to invest billions of dollars for services which are majorly digital or localized. Even with tourism, people don't often travel by sea. They take flight, which can get you to any part of the world in less than 24 hours, or probably slightly more. The retreat of United States is leading to formation of regional trade blocs. There's an increase in trade within regions, especially in Africa. Europe is also trying to do the same. Currently, more than 60% of trade of EU happens within EU borders. This shows a move towards regional economic resilience from globalization to do something called localization. Countries are trying to reduce their dependencies on long trade routes because the United States is now leaving. The empire is now getting eroded. New shipping disruptions like those in the Red Sea, policy changes, or another unexpected global event could be altering the status quo very fast. The United States' inability to defend the trade routes in Red Sea showed that now things aren't like the way it used to be. The United States has lost its power to assemble and mobilize. Now let's unpack the US military global spending. This is definitely not a real figure, but these figures are most popular. The annual cost for just maintaining these bases hits about $55 billion, covering everything from construction to utilities. Add in personal costs, and you're looking at upward of $80 billion a year. Here's what it means. Economic impact. The spending supports jobs, both in the US and host countries, but it's also a significant drain on federal budget. It's creating jobs only for a few, but consuming massive amount of financial resources. What does the United States get in return? Nothing. All this spending is done only because this has been happening for several decades. Strategic importance. Traditionally, these bases have been securing trade routes, offering rapid response capabilities, and project US power. But what does this power exactly mean? The United States is spending billions while it has lost all its industrial base. Guess what is the biggest industrial base that the United States currently has? Well, it's the Silicon Valley. Now that is also getting challenged by China. The United States is now slowly understanding that this money could be better spent on domestic issues like education or health. There is no point in spending taxpayers' money on military bases which brings no benefit to the United States. The extensive U.S. military presence is often viewed negatively, impacting international relations. Countries around the world are now telling the US to leave, as now there are new players in global arena who can do the work which the United States is doing. Yes, they cannot dominate the world like the United States, but who and why should anyone dominate the world? Throughout the history, any power which went beyond its capacity and capability declined, and in many cases, these powers and empires had a bloody end. The United States want to avoid such scenario. Bases in NATO countries used to strengthen diplomatic and economic ties with allies, as these bases encouraged trade by providing stability or deterring aggressions. But all this was the matter of past. Today, the United States is in debt of over $36 trillion. The average student debt per capita is above $30,000. These are huge figures. The main objective of the United States is no longer about maintaining its global dominance, but it's about managing its crumbling state of affairs. Military presence has led to economic dependencies or favoritism in trade. It's clearly visible that when it comes to relationship between the United States and the European Union is heavily dependent on the United States for its security framework. Without the support from the United States, the entire defense industries of European Union will collapse. This entire system of dependency has to change. The United States very soon will no longer be there in the Europe to pamper them. The European Union will have to come up with its own setup. Currently, both the European Union and Ukraine are getting ignored by the United States. The peace meeting is happening without them. This shows how important the European Union is for the United States right now. So looking at the future, here's what we might expect. First, trade. We'll see continued growth in digital and service sector with sustainability becoming a major driver. However, protectionism will radically increase as nations seek to protect domestic industries. Nations will try to become self-sufficient as much as possible. New trade alliances will be forming based on geopolitical alignments rather than just economic benefits. Technological shifts will also happen. AI, drones, and cyber capabilities might change how bases operate, potentially affecting where and how military dollars are spent. The linkage between military strategy and economic policy will grow, particularly as cyber threats become as significant as physical ones. In summary, the global trade and U.S. military spending abroad are like two sides of the same coin, influencing each other in ways that shape our world. Whether it's the economic implication, strategic maneuvers, or the push towards more sustainable future, these elements are pivotal. But overall, this system is becoming defunct, and the United States is now only trying to get rid of this. It's a very big challenge which the United States is facing right now. Yes, the American empire is on decline, but it has to decline in an organized manner, or else it will harm everyone around. If you found this exploration enlightening, please hit that like button, subscribe for more in-depth analysis, and drop your thoughts or questions in the comments. Thanks for joining me on this journey through numbers and narratives. Catch you in the next video. Peace out.